Okay. Remember where we left off?
Yeah, we are on
75?
Ayin Hay Amud Beis. We are, by my reckoning, four lines down from the top.
Yeah. 75B.
Right.
It's Arvu b'Bechor v'Maisa. Okay. Thank Hashem. We're able to learn Torah every day. Supposed to have a learning, we should have the Beis Hamikdash immediately. Naftali, I have to talk about changing the time of the shiur. I have a few options.
Okay.
That's well, I'll do that. Okay. Nisarvu b'Bechor v'Maisa.
You want to talk about it now?
At the end. We'll talk
At the
about it at
end.
the end.
Okay.
This will get distracted. Um, We learned in the Mishnah that when a Bechor and a Meiser get mixed in, actually when Karbonis get mixed in with a Bechor and a Meiser, other Karbonis. So we learned that you have to let it get a mum, and then let them all get a mum. And then you eat them with the stringency of a Bechor and a Meiser. In other words, the Bechor and Meiser has a stringency over other Karbonis. It's interesting because they're much more lenient. Bechor and Meiser. But when it comes to mum and then selling it, Bechor and Meiser isn't sold the same way other karbanos are sold. Other karbanos are allowed to be sold because with that money you're going to get a new sacrifice. Yeah, with the money you're going to get a new sacrifice, so you're allowed to sell it in the marketplace the way it's sold. And with the money you're going to buy a new sacrifice. Bechor Meiser, when it gets a mum, you don't sell it, you just eat it. So this is gonna end up with a stringency over the other one. Amar Rami Bar Chama says, Bechor lebeis Shammai ein machilin lenidus. There's a Gemara in Bechiros where it talks about what happens to a Bechor and a Meiser after it's redeemed, after it gets a mum after it gets a mum. So officially, it's supposed to be a carbon, and after it gets a mum, then the kayan eats it not as a carbon, just as his own private animal. So there's a machlekes beis Shammai and beis Hillel if he has to eat it when he's pure, or if he can eat it when he's tamei, and if he can feed it to a zar, to a regular person. And there's an opinion of Rabbi Kiva that he can even feed it to a non-Jew. So beis Shammai holds ein machilin lenidus, that someone that's tamei is not allowed to eat this bechar. Our question now, Rami Bar Chama's question, is Tmura Simahu. Let's say he makes it Tmura. Tmura is he exchanges this with another sacrifice. He says this carbon should be in place of that. So does the Tmura have the status of the Bechar as well, that that it can't be fed to a Nida? So Bechar ain't a Nifta. The rule is that when it comes to Bechar, even if it has a mum, you don't redeem it, so that you just eat it as it is. Another question is Tmura Samau. What about its Tmura? Do you redeem the Tmura? In other words, does the Tmura get anything different than the Bechar itself? Bechar ain't an Ishkal Balitra. When it comes to selling it, you're not supposed to sell the Bechar by its weight, which would be done the way it's done in the marketplace. Litra is like a liter. You don't sell it by its weight. Rather, you just sell it by estimation. Tmurasima, what's going to be with the Tmura? So basically, we have three questions over here about if the Tmura of a Bechar has any stringency over the Bechar itself. Amarava, so Rava answers, he says, Tanya Bechara Meiser Mishahoma Mo'esin Tmura Tmurasin Keitzabem. He says that a Bechar and a Meiser, Rava quotes this Brisa, that a Bechar and a firstborn animal and a Meiser animal, once they get a blemish, even after they get a blemish, they can still make Tmura, can still exchange it for another sacrifice. And the Tmura is the same like them, which would mean that it's mean that it has all those limitations on it. You can't feed it to a nida, you can't sell it the same way, and you don't redeem it. Okay. Boiram Barchama. Rami Barchama has a question. Hitvis bechar lebedek bias. Let's say someone has this bechar that has a mum, and the rule with the bechar that has mum is that the kayan just eats it. If it's Beishamai, the kayan eats it. If it's not Beishamai, then anyone can eat it, or you can feed it to anyone. What happens if then he consecrates it to the temple fund? Normally, something that's consecrated to the temple fund, you want to sell it in a way that it will bring in the most profit. However, Bechar, we said that it wasn't respectable to sell it that way, so you only sold it in estimation. You didn't sell it by weight. So let's say now you have this contradictory problem. Yeah, on one hand, it's a Bechar. You're not supposed to sell it by weight. On the other hand, you made it into consecrated to the temple fund, which means you should sell it by weight. So which one overweighs the other one? Ravcha de hekdesh adif. Do we say that the increase of profit to hekdesh takes precedence because it's going to bring in a higher price, and therefore you sell it by weight? Or maybe it's not respectful to start weighing the meat of a slaughtered blemished sacrifice, and so we should just sell it by estimation. So Amar Rabbi Yosi Bar Zvida, this is one of the sages in Eretz Yisrael, he explains, says, Tashma, come and listen. Nisa'arvu, we have a brisa, we have a mishnah actually. Nisa'arvu be'bechara meiser, our mishnah. If sacrifices got mixed in with bechara meiser, yiruat shista v'yochel k'bechara meiser. What do you have to do? If sacrifices got mixed in with the bechara meiser, you let it get a mum, and then you eat it just like bechara meiser, which means that you're not selling it. Lav l'meimer de'nish k'belitra. Does that not mean to say that you don't sell it by weight? Now, the proof here is that we're doing to the other sacrifices that got mixed into the bechar, is that we're ending up losing out on the value of those sacrifices that's now going to be used to redeem. We're going to use the money from that we're going to redeem it, and we're going to buy new sacrifices. Comes out that since you have the limitations of bechar meiser, so you're not going to bring in the same price, right? You're not going to bring in the same price for those sacrifices, which means that the respect that we give to the bechar takes precedence over the income to the temple. Rav Huna v'Rav Chizkiah Talmidi de Rabbi Yirmiyah Amri. This I'm not familiar with. That Rav Huna and Rav Chizkiah are students of Rabbi Yirmiyah. There were two Rabbi Yirmiyahs. This is probably the older one. But Amri, they say, Mi dami, how can you compare our Mishnah to the case of Rami Bar Chama, to the question of Rami Bar Chama? Hassam, when it came to our Mishnah, we have two types of sacrifices that are mixed together. We have shtei kedushas or shnei gufim. I have a karban, let's say a shlamim or something that got mixed in with the bechar. So I can't redeem them. I can't redeem the bechar. I don't know which one is which. I can't redeem the bechar, and so that limits me on what I'm going to do to the other sacrifice. So the other sacrifice is restricted because there's a bechar here that the laws of the bechar aren't changing. Hacha here, when with Rami Bar Chama's question, shtei kedushas v'gavechad. Over here, it's not that I have another sacrifice and now you're going to degrade the status of the bechar because of something outside of the bechar. On the bechar itself, I have another status. Excuse me. I have another status. I have bedek habayis, and I also have the bechar, because I consecrated to the bedek habayis. Oh, thank you. Sorry. Oh, oh. No, it's fine. Okay. What he means is what Rav Huna and Rav Chizkiah mean is that maybe because there's two statuses on the Bechar itself, maybe that would allow me to degrade the respect of the Bechar because of the Bedek Habayis that's on the Bechar. If it's for someone else, for a different sacrifice, then I won't degrade the respect. As we see in the Mishnah, that you can't sell it on by weight. You can't sell it like in the meat market because the Bechar is not allowed to be sold like that. But if the Bechar itself has the holiness of Bedek Habayis, maybe you are allowed. Okay, Maskifla Rabbi Yesi bar Ravin. Rabbi Yesi bar Ravin and Rabbi Yesi bar Zavida, they show up often together. There's two sages from Eretz Yisrael. Ma ilu amar haftu li b'char she'tfis lebedek habayis. Someone would say, where exactly are they? Somewhere in the middle. If someone would say, redeem for me the b'char that was consecrated, klum shaymin lai. We're definitely not going to do that. We're definitely not going to redeem the b'char. The Torah says not to redeem it. The Gemara says, one second, have to? How are you ever bringing this up? The Torah says clearly that you're not allowed to redeem it. So, you see, he was saying, one second, do you think that we would try to make the money for the Bedek Habayis by doing a redemption? And the Gemara says that how can you even bring that as an example? We never redeem the Bechar. Here we're not talking about redeeming the Bechar. Here we're talking about slaughtering the Bechar and selling its meat by weight. So that's a rabbinic decree. The rabbinic decree, it's degrading to the Bechar to do that. It says maybe we overlook that rabbinic decree in order to bring in more money to the temple fund. So the example that you're bringing, are we going to violate the biblical prohibition of redeeming a Bechar, is not an example at all, because we weren't talking about redeeming a Bechar that's alive. We're talking about shechting it and then selling its meat by weight. Alamar Rabami tries to answer the question, Klum hikne zeh alamashe kanolai. Very interesting. Rabami throws us over to Choshen Mishpat. We have over here a Bechar that has certain halachic restrictions on it, the way it's going to be sold, the meat could be sold. The person consecrates it to the Bedek Habayis. So we're asking that maybe you should be able to sell it now differently because we want to increase the income to the Bedek Habayis, to the temple fund. So Rabami says that when someone gives something to the Bedek Habayis, he can only give the amount of ownership that he has, he can give over to the Bedek Habayis. But he doesn't own anything. He doesn't own it enough that he's able to sell it by weight. He can only give to the Bedek Habayis the amount that he owns, which is his right to sell it by estimation, not by weight. So just like if someone would sell something, it says, Ma macharishan l'sheni, the first person can only sell to the second person whatever he owns in it. He can't sell to him more than what he owns. So to over here, just because he gives it to the Bedek Habayis doesn't mean that the Bedek Habayis now gets more than what the first person owned. The original owner only owned it enough that he could sell it in a certain way. Bedek Habayis also would be the same. Okay. That's our answer to Rami Bar Chama's question. Why do they consider
So like putting a fee on top, like try to make a fee for like another way to make the money. Like, there's many ways to make the money.
Those fees on top are normally when someone's doing something wrong, or if it's a redemption. Certain redemptions, he's redeeming it himself. He adds a fifth. Yeah, we don't have that here. Those are all Torah laws. All those fifths. That's not the rabbis don't add them fifths.
I don't know. To me, it seems like it's easier than.
No, so we're saying over here that what would you do if a sacrifice got mixed in with the bachar? You would have to sell it by estimation. That's it, which is not a problem. You don't get in the same income that you would normally get, but that's the loss that happens. The Mishnah was discussing sacrifices that get mixed together. Said that there creates a problem. Remember, there's certain sacrifices that never get mixed because one's a male, one's a female. It says, the Mishnah says, everything can get mixed together. The Mishnah says, except for a chatas and an asham. A chatas is a female and an asham is a guilt offering is a male. Gemara asks, Ma'ishna chatas v'asham? What's the difference of chatas v'asham? The hay zachar v'hay nekeva, that the chatas is going to be is a nekeva, and the asham is a zachar. Chatas v'ayla nami. Same thing applies to a chatas and a naila. A naila is a zachar, is a male. The chatas is a nekeva. The Gemara says, ikasar nasi. One of the chatais is the goat that a nasi, a king, brings if he sins. That's a male animal. So the male animal could get mixed up with the oila. Gemara asks, now there's some missing words in the Gemara. Gemara asks, but so 1 second. The chatas and the asham, the whole way of saying that they don't get mixed up is because one's a male and one's a female. You're going to end up with a chatas also over there that's a male, which is the chatas of the nasi. Gemara answers, but I included those missing words. It says, "Hai seyar v'hai tzemer." I know that they're both male, but the goat of the nasi only has hair; he doesn't have wool. The asham is a sheep and it has wool. However, by the oila, they could both be goats. So that's a problem, and that could get mixed up. Gemara asks, Pesach v'asham nami le'marav. Carbon Pesach and Asham should also not be able to be confused, because Hai ben Shana v'Hai ben Shtei Shanim, because the Carbon Pesach is within its first year, and the Asham is within its second year. So you're going to see that it's bigger. It's not going to get mixed up. Gemara says, well, Ika Asham Nazir Asham Mitzayra, that they can come from a sheep that's in its first year. The guilt offering of the Nazir and the guilt offering of the Mitzayra. Another thing is that it's hard to guess the age. Every once in a while, there's a larger animal that's younger and it's actually big. It looks like it's a 2-year-old, and that's why by the amusement parks they have someone there that guesses your age. Okay.
And then some of the right stick, so they don't care how old you are.
Okay. So there's 2 ways of answering that last question. Either the question was about an asham and a Karban Pesach, that you should always be able to tell them apart. So one answer was, well, you have certain type of asham that you can't tell apart because they're the same age. Another possible answer is that just because over there you should be able to tell them apart because of the age, that's not always foolproof. There's times that someone looks older or someone looks younger.
At what point in the process are they being mixed together that the Gemara says this is okay?
This is talking about live animals.
So this is an animal that's been designated. All these animals have been designated for a carbon.
Right.
So you lose a connection to the donor once they're all mixed together. Right?
Um, that's a possibility if there's several donors that got mixed together, but it could be it's all the same donor. That he had an ashram, he had an ayla, he had a this, and you know, and then he puts them all in the herd, and then now they're all mixed up. Now he doesn't know which one is which.
So, so, so this is before it's been designated or before it's been given to the
It's
base of
designated.
Mikdash?
It's designated, but hasn't been brought yet.
Okay.
And so the main point of our Mishnah was that we don't say bittel when it comes to live animals. We don't say one gets nullified. I think so. And then the Gemara goes through the different solutions. So then what do you do if it's not nullified? He said, well, you wait till it gets a mum or different things that, you can do. Okay. Next Mishnah says, Asham shenesarav b'shlamim. If an Asham and a Shlamim get mixed up, this is not such a problem because the blood of an Asham is 2 which are 4, and the blood of a Shlamim, which is 2 applications which are 4. You must put on the 2 corners. So there's no problem with this bringing the sacrifice. Reb Shimon says, as Reb Shimon Bar Yochai, Shneim yishchatu b'tzafin. You have to slaughter them both on the north. V'yochlu k'chamer shabem. And you have to eat it like the strictness of the Asham, which means you only have 1 day. Now, Amrulai, the sages say to Reb Shimon, Ein maybe in kachim beis absul. No, they disagree with Reb Shimon. They say, according to your solution of what you do with the Asham and the Shlamim, that you just slaughter it and you consider it all an Asham, slaughter it on the north, which would be Asham, place of slaughtering the Asham, because that's Kodesh Kadashim. The Shlamim is Kachim Kalim. And you have to eat it only for 1 day and 1 night, as opposed to a Shlamim, which is 2 days, 2 days in the 1 night. So he said the sages say that if you're going to do that, you're going to end up bringing the Kachim to Psul. Why? What does it mean bring the Kachim to Psul? It means if you don't finish it in time, you're going to end up throwing out meat. And this really has more time. So what's the solution of the Chachamim? The Chachamim solution is that you wait till it gets a mum, and then you sell it, and then you buy actual sacrifices, and then you keep it according to that, to what it's supposed to be. The Reb Shimon isn't concerned about bringing Kachim to Psul. He just says, slaughter it like this and keep it as holy as possible. And the sages say, no, no, we're going to redeem it. Now, Nesar v'chaticha is, let's say it's already sacrificed, and now it's all mixed up. The pieces get mixed up. It's b'chatichas, b'chatichas, kachim kalim. You mix up the these sacrifices together that need to be eaten. Let's say a taida. If it's taida is only 1 day, together with the chatas. Okay, so that's not a big deal. The only thing is that the taida needs to be eaten. Only the chatas is eaten by kayanim, so now the taida is only going to be allowed to be eaten by kayanim. Or let's say it was something that was eaten by 2 days, and now it gets mixed in with something that's eaten by 1 day. For example, a shlamim that gets mixed in with the taida. So all of these cases, even the chacham will agree that over here you don't have the solution that we had before, where you can redeem it, because that was only by the live animal where you redeem it. But over here you're going to be stuck. You're going to have to eat it in the restrictive way of the one that's stricter. By 1 day, and only kayanim. Tani Tana Kamid Rav was a student that taught in front of Rav. He says, similar to what we're just saying now from the sages. They say that if you have fruits of Shvius, that's the fruits of the Shemitah year, you should not use those fruits, use the money that you get from those fruits to, really, you're not supposed to be selling it, to to buy truma, because maybe you're exchanging it for truma, because what's going to happen now is that the truma is going to have a limitation on it, that the limitation of Shemitah. Limitation of Shemitah is that after there's no more produce in the field, you have to take the produce of the house. In other words, if there's no more produce outside for the wild animals to eat, then you have to take the produce of the house and bring it outside. Beer meisters. You have to leave it outside. It's like you and the animals eat together. You can't start hoarding it or storing it for yourself. It has to be you and the animals eat equally. So if there's nothing left in the fields, you have to start taking it out. Now, if you would have truma there, then you would have to take the truma outside. The truma would have to go to waste. So therefore, don't use Shemitah food to purchase truma, because you're going to end up limiting the truma, because the truma is going to get the status of the Shemitah. You're going to be limiting the amount of time you're going to have to eat the truma. By Shemitah, it holds its sanctity. So it's going to, even though you're selling it, but the money that you get from the Shemitah is still Shemitah money. And then it's going to go on to the Truma food, and it's going to be now a combination of Truma Shemitah. You don't want the Truma to go to waste, because if you limit the time on how long you have to eat it, it's going to go to waste. Amru Rabbanan Kamei de Rava. Rabbanan said to Rava, it's probably Rabbah, says, the Lake Reb Shimon. This doesn't fit with Reb Shimon. The Reb Shimon, Amar Mebiyim Kachel Veis Absul. We learned in our Mishnah that Reb Shimon wasn't concerned about making sacrifices go to waste, because he said that if you have two sacrifices that get mixed together with different times, different limitations on it, he said, don't worry about it. You offer them both, and you keep it stricter. If you keep it stricter, you may end up not finishing it in the right time. You can have all the limitations. It's going to go to waste. Reb Shimon wasn't concerned about that. So when you tell me that you can't buy Shemitah, you can't buy Truma with Shemitah money, so Reb Shimon would disagree. Because Reb Shimon holds that that's not a problem. Just like he says by the sacrifices, that it's not a problem to keep it to the stricter laws, even though it may go to waste. So Amar Lahu, Rabbah says to the students, he says, Afilu Tamer Reb Shimon, no. Reb Shimon would agree to this, to the statement of Rab, that you can't use Shemitah money to buy Truma. He says because over there, that was Hanimili Di'evid. The Mishnah was talking about where it was already mixed together and you don't know what to do. What's your solution going to be? So he gave you the solution of just keeping it stricter. L'chatchila alai. But to go ahead and buy Truma directly with the Shemitah money, that you didn't have to do. So Reb Shimon would agree that you shouldn't be doing that. It's only after it was already mixed in, Reb Shimon has his solution. Gemara says, L'chatchila alai. Reb Shimon says, L'chatchila, you're not allowed to do this. 1 second. Eisvei Abaya. If I ask a question on this, I would have put the L'chatchila alai after the Eisvei. Eisvei Abaya, L'chatchila alai. I would have done it like that, but the Gemara has it the other way. Bias quoting a source, he says, "V'kulan, all sacrifices, Rashem came l'shanis b'chilasan." In other words, you can eat sacrifices however you want. Alachlan sluyin shlukim. You can roast the meat. You can shlukim means boil the meat very much, or muvushalim, or you can just boil it regular. V'lasis l'tzeichen tavlini chulin v'tavlini truma, and you can put in different spices to eat it. Mustard and ketchup and whatever. Divrei, it says over here, Divrei Rabbi Shmuel, it's supposed to be Divrei Reb Shimon. This is the words of Reb Shimon. Now, what's going on over here? You're taking spices. What type of spices? Either it's chulin spices, regular mundane spices, or truma spices, and you're mixing it in with your carbon. Now, the problem is that the carbon has a time limit on it of only 1 day or 2 days, right? Truma has no time limit. You eat it whenever you want. Spices can last a long time. So it's possible that when you mix the spices in, you're actually going to be spoiling your truma, spices that were truma, and because you're limiting the time. And Reb Shimon says that there's no problem, which means that even l'chatchila, Reb Shimon holds that you're allowed to mix spices in. You're going to bring truma spices. lechatchila you can bring truma to psul, which was not what Rabbah said. It's Abaya's question on Rabbah. Amarlei, Rabbah responds back to Abaya. Hanach l'truma tavlin midrabanan. He asked me a kasha from the tavlin, from the spices. The real truma is only grain, oil, and wine. That's a daraisa. Now you have spices. You have I don't know, cilantro, or pepper. So this is not. It is truma, but it's only rabbinic truma. So the fact that Reb Shimon is lenient here is not a proof that it would be lenient by other cases, by a biblical truma, that you could bring it to psul. Maybe not. Maybe it's only by rabbinic truma. We said truma, spices of truma. He says he doesn't mind if you mix it into carbon, even though maybe you're going to end up throwing out. It's going to diminish its time, and you're not going to be able to finish it because that's rabbinic truma. So we're more lenient. Eisvei Abai asked another question. It says, "Ein leichen truma because of meiser sheni, because of meiser. Neshemayit pachilasa. Meiser sheni was the money that you brought to Yerushalayim, and you're supposed to spend it on food, and you're going to eat it. So the food that you buy, it says over here in this Mishnah or Brisa, it says that you should not buy truma because you're limiting it. You can only eat it in Yerushalayim. Maybe you're not going to stay in Yerushalayim so long. You're going to leave, whatever. You're going to end up invalidating the truma. It's going to end up going to waste because you have more restrictions on it. It's meiser sheni. We don't want to do that to the truma. Reb Shimon says it's not a problem. It says you're allowed to buy truma with meiser sheni, even though the meiser sheni is limiting the truma. So this is a strong question because here we're seeing that lechatchila you're allowed to limit the truma. Ishtikle. Rabbah was quiet. He did not respond anything to Abaya. Kiyasa l'kamid Rav Yosef. Remember, Abaya also learned by Rav Yosef. Learned by Rabbi, learned by Rav Yosef. Comes to Rav Yosef, Amalei. So Rav Yosef says, "Amalei tisrmi ha." Why didn't you ask Rabbah another question? It says, "Ein mebashling yerek shel shvius b'shem shel truma shlo yaviu kachim lebeis psul." It says you should not cook vegetables of shmita with oil of truma. Because when you have that mixture now, vegetables of shmita with oil of truma, you're going to be limiting the oil of truma, right? Because it's going to have the restrictions of shmita where you may have to take it out put it outside for the animals to eat, and you're going to be limiting the truma, which we said you shouldn't do. And Reb Shimon did we say Reb Shimon Mat? And Reb Shimon allows it. That's a very good support, a very good proof. Reb Shimon allows even lechatchila. Rabbi Yosef is telling Abaya when you spoke to Rabbah and you asked him a question, you could have asked him this question. Amalei Abaya says, "V'lavmi Yosfi mihad taplin." I already asked Rabbah something from spices, and Rabbah gave me a sharp answer. He said, "You asking me from spices? Spices is rabbinic. So hachnami b'trumas yerek midrabanan." We could say that the truma is of a vegetable which is rabbanan. Now, 1 second. It's a problem over here. The Shita Mekubetzes explains this. Because we were talking about yerek of shmita, vegetables of shmita, with oil of truma. So the Shita Mekubetzes explains that the reason why we have a problem over here, oil of truma is biblical truma, right? Because oil. It says that lav dafka, but it's not necessarily referring to olive oil. It's referring to one of those other oils. Some other, what are those unhealthy oils? Canola, soy, I don't know. It could be any of the other oils. Palm oil, coconut oil, whatever those oils are. It could use other oils. And if it was one of those oils, then it would be rabbinic. So Abaya is telling Rabbi Yosef, I don't have real proof over there that it would be that the oil that you're talking about is biblical. The Rabbah could have answered me that it's all rabbinic. Rabbi Yosef responds. He says, if it wanted to give you a case of rabbinic truma, then Yachi, he says, if that's the case, it should have said it the opposite. Yerek shel truma b'shemen shel shviyas. Should have said the vegetable. If you wanted to give me that example, a much more typical example of rabbinic truma would have been a vegetable of truma, right? Because vegetables there's no question that vegetables of truma is all rabbinic. The oil could go either way. Oil could be olive oil, it could be other oils. But vegetables would only be rabbinic. So you would say like this, Yerek shel truma b'shemen shel shviyas. If I wanted to mix two things together and one of them was rabbinic, I would have said that the vegetable is truma, not the oil is truma, and then leave it open. Because the typical thing in the ancient world was olive oil. So the assumption would be that it would be biblical. So Rabbi Yosef maintains that this would be a very strong question that Abaya should have told to Rabbah. So Abaya responds, he says, "V'lav mi Yosef must listen to Mater Reb Shimon." They already asked from a Mishnah where Reb Shimon was Mater. V'amali di Yarif. And Rabbah already answered me that was a case where it was already mixed in. Once it was mixed together, remember in our Mishnah, where it was mixed together, I wanted to say that Reb Shimon would say the same thing, that it should be permissible, and we said no, because once it's mixed together, that's a b'diavad. How are you going to resolve it? So you eat it as the more stricter one. That's what when the students asked, said to Rabbah that Reb Shimon wouldn't hold of the statement of Rav. So Rabbah said, no, that's because it was mixed in already. Rabbah's statement is lechatchila. So over here, where Reb Shimon says it's allowed, it's because it was already hachanami diyarav. It's already mixed in. I didn't cook it yet, but it was mixed in. So what do you do with it now? So comes along Reb Shimon and says you're allowed to cook it because it was already mixed. That's considered a b'diavad. Once it's mixed, it's a b'diavad. Rabbi Yosef says you're worried about Rabbah answering you that this is already b'diavad because it's mixed in. We have another solution. Idi Yarev, my time with the Rabbanon. So what do the Rabbanon want you to do if it's mixed in? The Rabbanon say, Ein mevashlan. You can't cook it. What do they want you to do? Throw it out? Baya responds, Midihaba Hashem Shlamim. What do the Chachamim want you to do with the Asham and the Shlamim that get mixed together? We already learned, but Rabbi Yosef will explain what we learned. Midami, Rabbi Yosef says, how can you compare? Hasam is like the Cantabria. Over there, what the Chachamim are going to tell to Reb Shimon, Reb Shimon's solution when you have two sacrifices that are mixed together, Reb Shimon says just slaughter them and keep it like the holier one. The Chachamim say, don't slaughter it, let them both get a mum, and then redeem it. You're right, which means get a mum and then sell it, and then with that money you buy new sacrifices. So you don't have to limit either of the sacrifices to the other one. So over there, it's like the Cantabria. Oh, let's like the Cantabria. Over here, what are you supposed to do? You have vegetables and oil that are mixed together, and we tell you not to cook it. What do you want them to do with it? Just throw it out? Over here, we're dealing with, what did we say over there? That if the pieces of meat get mixed together, even the Chachamim agree that you have to eat them according to the more stricter sacrifice. You have to eat it like the stricter one. Okay. So you can't say that it was already mixed together. It must be that it wasn't mixed together. And Rabbah wouldn't have been able to respond that it was mixed together already, because or else the Chachamim would agree that you have to cook it. Maskefler Ravina says, asked to Rabbi Yosef, says, Midami, this is the earlier Ravina, not the later Ravina. He says, how can you compare? Chatich sheba chatich is less klal. when it came to the two pieces of meat, but you don't know which one belongs to the chatas, you don't know which one belongs to the shlamim, right? You mix them up. So then, so then there's no solution. So you're going to have to eat it like the stricter one. But it's like the kanta beschita. You could squeeze the oil out of the vegetables, and then you can use the oil for something else. And the vegetables, which were shmita, you'll keep with shmita's things. So the Gemara says, Ravina says that to Rabbi Yosef, why doesn't he has a solution? You don't have to say that it's a bidiyah, but you could resolve it by squeezing the oil out. Rabbi Yosef says, or would say, how can you squeeze it out? Nischat tuva, if you squeeze it, like really squeeze it, press it and pulverize it, then kamafsid b'shviyas, then you're destroying the shemitah. Nischat porta, you would have to squeeze it out and put it in a centrifuge, right? Centrifuge, that's what it's called. And the oil would separate. If you're just gonna squeeze it a little bit, safe for your ma'ariv, then you're still gonna have the oil that's mixed in. Or it must be that it wasn't mixed at all. And nevertheless, Reb Shimon allows you to cook it. That's a raya that Reb Shimon allows you to mix it together, even lechatchila. Which means that Reb Yosef had a point when he told Abaya that you should have asked Rabbah a better question. This question would have worked. Abaya has a question to Rabbah. It says, Reb Shimon Lamachras, they're talking about a suffix mitzayra. It says the following day after you do the haircut, so you have to. It's not just the haircut; they shave all his hair, right? So maybe Hashem he brings a guilt offering. It's called the Hashem mitzayra. And he also brings the oil. Remember, the oil is supposed to go on his finger and his thumbs and toes. The oil of the Hashem. And he says, Im shel mitzayra. If I'm really a mitzayra and I have to bring the sacrifices, harei Hashem v'zalugay. Then this is going to be the guilt offering and the oil. And if I'm not a mitzayra, asham zeh shel shalmi nedava. This asham should be brought as if it's a shlamim, which the application of the blood for an asham and the shlamim is the same, so it's good. It's making a condition. But I say asham ton shchita b'tzafan, and we're going to have to slaughter it on the north, which is not a problem because the shlamim could be slaughtered on the north as well. Umata and Bahinas, we're also going to have to put the blood on the owner's, on the person that's bringing it, on his thumbs and big toes. Usmicha, you're going to have to do smicha on it, which is different. You don't do smicha on the shlamim, right? Maybe the opposite. The smicha, shlamim does do smicha. You do the smicha, you don't. I think the shlamim you do smicha, the asham you don't do. So now we're going to consider it a shlamim. We're going to have the severities of the asham and of the severities of the shlamim. But it'll only be eaten one day and one night, just like an asham. They have over there all the details. Let's see what they say. Number 2. It says, Mitzayra Asham is on the north side. Okay. Shlam is subject to smicha prior to its slaughter. And also you have to bring wine, the nesachim, right? And it's chasav v'shaik, the chest and the thigh are waved. So since it's a shlamim, it's going to have the laws of a shlamim, even though it's possibly a asham mitzayra. So here we have a korban that we don't know if he really needs to bring. So just in case, we're going to do it as a shlamim. Shlamim is just a peace offering, so it could be given as a gift. So what are we seeing now? Reb Shimon is allowing. Who's saying this whole thing? It's all Reb Shimon. Shimon says that lechatchila, you're allowed to bring a sacrifice. That you're going to end up limiting its time, even if it's a shlamim, you're going to limit its time to the limitation of an asham, which is instead of 2 days, it's going to be 1 day. The problem with limiting the time is that you may end up not finishing it in time, and it's going to end up getting just burnt as because it becomes puzzle. The Gemara answers, it's not a strong kasha, because to Tikkun Gavrashani, you don't have a choice. I know you're doing it lechatchila. You're going ahead and taking the sacrifice and you're making the doubt. But the problem is that the person may be a mitzayra, and the person can't come back into to function like a regular human being until he brings his sacrifice. So what do you want him to do? I know for the sacrifice, it's lechatchila you're doing it, but for the person, it's like a b'diavad. You have to fix the person. Gemara says, we get why you have to bring the guilt offering, but loig ma'ikal meimar. How are you bringing the oil? So what's the problem with the oil? He says, what's a big deal? He says, if it's not a guilt offering, so it's just a donation. He's donating oil to the temple. He says, one second. If someone donates oil, so there's a rule that you have to take a scoop of that oil and offer it as a carbon. You're allowed to do it. So just like a carbon mincha. Right? Carbon mincha, you take the flour and the oil, you mix it, right? You take it. So here it's just plain oil, but you're supposed to take a scoop from it. So, where's that source? Rashi brings that someone that donates oil, you have to take the scoop and you have to burn the scoop, the 3-finger scoop, the kaimitz it's called. Put it on the mizbeach. He says, okay, don't worry, the makmitz, we're doing that too, right? Just in case. If it belongs to the asham because he's a mitzayra, so then you don't have to do this. But if it's not an asham, it's just a donation, then you do have to do this. The Gemara says, "V'dilma mitzayra by matan sheva." 1 second, but maybe he's a mitzayra, and you have to sprinkle it on him 7 times by the oil. The Gemara says, "Diyav, we did that too." The Gemara says, "V'chasalei." He says, but now you don't have a lug anymore because first of all you took a scoop out, and once you take a scoop out, then you don't have the lugs. Then how can you use it for sprinkling? It's missing. If it's chaser, if it doesn't have the full amount, it's missing. You can't use it. It says the ma'isi porta malilei. After you took the scoop, you had to top it off with other oil. Ditnan chaser alog achla yatzak yimalenu. It says if some of it spilt before he sprinkled, it says you fill it up, you top it off. I know some people are so strict with Havdalah because Havdalah wine spills over, right? So they picked up the cup for Hine and then they put it down, then they pick it up. And, when it comes to the last bracha, there's missing already some wine from the Havdalah. They top it off. They top it off with a little more wine. Keep it. So here, you'll top it off with all right. It says, Vaboy Haktara, but you have to offer the kaimetz, which is the scoop that you got from the oil, you have to offer it onto the mizbeach. And now the problem is that what's the problem with that? It's a big deal. He's going to offer it on the mizbeach. No, that's what the Gemara is going to answer. It says the aktile. Okay, big deal. So you offer it. So emas. When are you offering it on the mizbeach? If it's after you sprinkled already, so then habaluhu shirayim shechasher ben kmitzal aktara. So if he's not a mitzayra, yeah, let's say he's not a mitzayra. So you have to put the kaimetz. Sometimes oil congeals, like you put it in the fridge. So this would be a solution to do kamitza on oil because you make it congeal. You get like a scoop, but let's not say you can get a scoop from the liquid as well. Anyway, sometimes the olive oil is thicker. And notice like sometimes they have like this like green. It's like it looks green. Anyway, if it's not a mitzayra, then the fact that he's burning a scoop on the altar, that's actually the law. Now, what happens if he takes the scoop, he's going up to the altar, he's going to burn it over there. Meanwhile, they've already sprinkled from the oil onto the mitzvah. It says you have a problem because shirayim shechaser ben kmitza laktara emaktim esakaymes aleim. If some of the leftovers get lost in between consecration and the kaimetz and putting it on the altar, so it says that you can't do it anymore. You can't put the kaimetz on the altar because there's nothing nothing left. But it became lacking from the leftovers. And if you're going to burn it before you did the sprinkling, then you shouldn't be allowed to sprinkle because kol shemen al isha maria bal taktiru. No. What's happening here is that if you did a sprinkling, then that's considered like it was offered. And once something was offered, then the remnants are not allowed to be put on the altar. So if the sprinkling was done first, now you want to burn a part of it on the altar, that would, if the sprinkling was done and it's really a mitzvah, because he is a mitzvah, then we're going to have a problem with doing the other part as if it's a shlamim and not a shlamim, as if it's a donation, and putting another part on the altar. Rav Yehuda, so this is a problem. How are you going to resolve this? Rav Yehuda, Breder of Shimon ben Pazi. But he says that actually what you're going to do is you're going to offer the scoop before you do the hazah. Now the problem was offer the scoop before you do the hazah. Oh, then you shouldn't be allowed to. Then you should not be allowed to sprinkle. It says, but how would you do this? So he says like this. It says the masikul l'shem eitzim. Bring it up on the altar as if you're not bringing it as a offering. You bring it up on the altar as if it's fuel, as if it's wood. And then when you sprinkle, you don't sprinkle it as if you're sprinkling. You sprinkle it as if you're just throwing some water. If he's a mitzvah, so then what you put on the altar is not considered kmitza. It's not considered the offering because you put it up just for fuel. It wasn't actually the offering. And then you should be allowed to sprinkle afterwards. And if he's not a mitzvah, and what you put on the altar was actually the kaimetz, so then how are you allowed to sprinkle it? You say, well, it's just water. I'm just sprinkling it like water. I'm not doing a service. Tanya, Rebbe Lezer Aimer, because Rebbe Lezer says that's things that are not supposed to go on the altar. It says you can't offer it on the altar as a sweet smell. But you're allowed to bring it on the altar. L'shem eitzim, as if it's just fuel, as if it's just wood. Gemara says Vika Shirayim Deboy Malinu. What about after you take the it's supposed to be the boy Mechlinu probably. It says that you have after you do the kaimetz, there's two ways of reading this. One way of reading T'boy Malino is we said that you had to fill it up, you had to top it off afterwards because you took the kaimetz out, so you had to top it off. The other way of reading it is T'boy Mechlino, that it's supposed to be eaten. Then it says, and you have, if you topped it off, so then you never took kmitza from the part that you just added. How could you eat it without doing kmitza on it? My answer is departically. You redeem that part. And that's not considered that's not considered carbon, and so therefore you don't have to do kmitza on it. Parklei hecha, where did you redeem it? We're talking about just that additional oil that you topped off after you did the kmitza because you needed it to be full in order to do the sprinkling. So, if it's inside, the word gav means inside. Kamayal chul azara. How could you redeem it now in the azara? Comes chulin. I have a kasha over here. I thought we said before that you're allowed to bring chulin spices to eat the sacrifice. How are you bringing chulin into the azara? This is really a problem. Okay, I don't know the answer. So, now if you redeem it outside, if then it's the carbon wasn't allowed to leave the courtyard. So how do you redeem it outside? If you took it outside, it says la'ilam gavoy. Really, you're redeeming it inside. Gavoy is inside. You're not allowed to bring chulin into the azara, but here you're not actually bringing it in. Here it's just turning into chulin. Where it says Vam Rab Shimon, Ein Misnad Ben Shemen. Rab Shimon, this whole solution would only be if you're allowed to donate oil. But Rab Shimon's of the opinion that says you're not allowed to donate oil, just plain oil. It says Tikkun Gabra Shiny. Rab Shimon would allow this if you need to fix this mitzayra that is not sure if he's chayev. Yosef Rav Rechume, a new name here. Kamei de Ravina, Yosef Kamash Mei de Ravuna Bar Tachlifa, and he's saying over in the name of Ravuna Bar Tachlifa. Says, Nema Asham Zay Yasham Tali. We were mixing in, we were saying that the Asham is going to be a Shlamim. Now, how are we going to do this? We don't know if he really needs the Asham. So we'll say, just in case it would be a Shlamim. So why don't you just say that it's Asham Tali? Asham Tali is if someone has a doubt, then he could bring a Asham Tali. Now, what are we referring to here? Maybe he doesn't have any doubts. Whatever the case is, the solution that we're doing is that if it would be a shlamim, then you would be limiting the time of how long you have to eat the shlamim. That was our original question. That if you bring it as an asham, and he really doesn't need it, then it's actually a shlamim. And then you're limiting the amount of time that you have to eat the shlamim, which was problematic. So Rechume is saying that why doesn't he bring it as asham tali, which doesn't have a limited time, which doesn't have more time. It has the same amount of time as a regular asham. Shmamina mantana the polyglot the Rebbe Lezer that says, okay. The answer to this is that Rebbe Lezer holds that you're allowed to bring an asham tali as an adava, so as a donation. So that's why you would bring an asham tali, because we're following the opinion of Rebbe Lezer. So he says, Rebbe Lezer. Yeah, Rebbe Lezer said that you could bring an asham every day, asham tali every day, just in case. So, but who argues on Rebbe Lezer? Reb Shimon, no, it's Reb Shimon that argues. The Amar ein misnad asham tali. He says that you're not allowed to bring an asham tali if you don't have to, but you're allowed to bring a shlamim, and that's why Reb Shimon was giving the solution of the shlamim. Amar lei, Ravina says to Rab Rechume, says Torah. Says, what's with the Torah? I thought you're supposed to be an expert. Imri b'dichri mechalfilach. How could you even suggest the asham was a zachar? Asham is a is a sheep. I'm sorry. The Asham Tali has to be 2 years old. The Asham Mitzaira is 1 year old. So you're bringing the wrong sacrifice. You thought you had such a great solution. You came up with, now we know the opinion that doesn't hold the Rebbe Lezer, but it turns out that's not a solution at all because it's a different animal. It's like a trick question. Okay, let's take a look at the next Mishnah. Ivari Chatas. This is a sin offering. It's only eaten by Kayanim, and you have the limbs. Shenesarva be'ivari oila, which got mixed in with Ivari oila. Now the Ivari Chatas are supposed to be eaten. The Ivari oila, the limbs of the oila, are supposed to be burnt. So what do you do with this? This got mixed up when in the slaughterhouse. They didn't label every part. Now the cars, every part has like a serial number on it. They didn't put a serial number on each of the limbs here, on each of the pieces. Rebbe Lezer Eimer, Yitein Lamaila, says, put it all on the Mizbeach. The chatas is supposed to be eaten. You're not supposed to put it on as an offering, but we'll put it on as fuel. Okay, so it's not something that's it's an offering, it's just fuel. Chachamim say no, tu b'tzirasan. You have to wait till it spoils, and then you just burn it as outside. It's nicer. It is, but we don't have a solution. V'yatzel lebeis streif, and then you just burn it outside the temple. My time with the Rebbe Lezer, the Gemara asks, what's the reason Rebbe Lezer that says that you're allowed to bring it up on the altar? Amar Kra v'al mizbech li'al reich nichayach. We quoted this before. It says you're not allowed to bring things on the altar. That's only l'reich nichayach yatamayla. It's only for the sweet smell. That means as an offering. Avalatamala l'shem eitzim. But you're allowed to bring them up as fuel, as wood, or etc. Rabbanan. What do the Rabbanan do? They say that you're not allowed to do this. They say miyat rachmana isam. This pasuk is the Karban Rashis Takriva Isam LaHashem. It's a pasuk. You want to get a chumash? Let's see. Well, Mizbeach Layalo. This maybe is this the Bikurim? Beis Yibez. Okay.
Does it become the default that when they don't know it's a question, they just put it in the burn?
So Rabbi Lezer, no, you can't put it on the altar, but Rabbi Lezer is saying that it could be belongs on the altar. So
all that they have to keep it as a fuel. Basically, you can put anything there to keep it as fuel.
yeah. It says over here, you may, however, bring figs and dates, the source of honey, as the first fruit offering to God, which means as the Bikurim, you may bring leavening as the 2 loaves of the festival of the weeks, but they should not go up on the altar as a pleasant aroma to God. So Rebbe Lezer says you can't bring these things that don't belong on the altar. You can't bring it as an offering, as a reach nichayach. But you're allowed to bring them as fuel. Put it as fuel. So, what do the Chachamim say? They say oisam hu di'atamayla avalatamala shemitzim. It's only yeast and honey that's not supposed to go on the altar as a sweet smell, but it can go as fuel. But limbs of achatas, you never said can go as fuel. Knows that implication. L'reach nichayach, it can't be. It can't be a reach nichayach, but it's allowed to be eitzim. It's allowed to be wood. That would only be by the things that the pasuk is actually talking about, which is the leaven and the fruit. Rebbe Lezer, what does he do with the word isam? Isam is a limitation, saying that it's only those things. It says isam hu derabe lach kevesh k'mizbeach. It says that you can't bring it on the ramp. It says well mizbeach layalo. It's coming to include also the ramp. Aval midi achrin elai. But other things are allowed to go on the ramp. There's no problem. Rabbanan. What are the Rabbanan do? How do they know that the yeast and the things? Let me see how this is explained here. Alien lemizbeach kabesh. Alien lemizbeach kabesh minayin tamalem lemizbeach. Let me read it from your Gemara. Let me see if it's clear. So, does this work? Say like this. What does Rebbe Lezer do with the word them? Isam, right? Rebbe Lezer, Isam hu de rabbi lach kevesh k'mizbeach. It is only for them, referring to the sa'ar and dvash, leavening and the honey, that included for you, that I included for you in the prohibition of the ramp like the altar itself, which means, it says ve'ela mizbeach, to the altar. You can't even burn it on the ramp that leads up to the altar. Rabbi Lezer uses the term them to limit the stringency to the prohibition of leavening and honey. But the prohibition against burning remnants of sacrifices applies only on the altar itself, not on its ramp.
And then here, the example that we had before about the head, one head was permitted, the other one without. Yeah,
What did we say about the heads of goats?
like one was out, the other one was combo.
We had to bring two together? No.
One's allowed.
No, but here we don't have that. Here we don't have a mixture like that.
To know.
Exactly. So now the question is, what do the Rabbanan say? How do the Rabbanan learn that that this is limited only to the ramp itself? There's a prohibition only on sa'ar and dvash and leaven. This Rabbanan Tarti Mashma. Tarti Shmama. The Rabbanan say that I can learn two things from this one word. I can learn two things from this one word, and they can get both halachas. One halacha is that that it's only the honey that's only the leaven and honey that's allowed to be brought as firewood, but not karbanos, not a carbon. You can't bring a carbon as firewood. And the second thing is that the restriction of the ramp is only for the honey. Yeah, that makes sense. That's the two halachas that the Rabbanan gets from it. Okay, let's leave it over here. We're up to Masnisin. Masnisin like Aitana. Yeah. Okay. Okay, Shakar.
You wanted to discuss something?
Yeah. Let me just turn off the